The views expressed in this interview are those of the individuals and do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. government, the Department of Defense, the U.S. Navy, or the Naval Postgraduate School. The Trident Room has been brought to you by the Naval Postgraduate School Alumni Association and Foundation. For questions, comments, and suggestions, please email us at tridentroompodcasthost@nps.edu and find us online at nps.edu/tridentroompodcast. Welcome to the Trident Room, brewer of stout conversation, unfiltered and on tap. In today's episode, Trident Room hosts Mike Morris and Brian Pajarillo sit down and have a drink with co-author of the ISIS Reader, Craig Whiteside. This episode was recorded the 19th of August, 2020.
So today we welcome to the Trident Room Dr. Craig Whiteside, assistant professor at the Naval War College, right here at NPS.
Correct.
Also a senior associate at the War College Center on Irregular Warfare and Armed Groups, and a fellow at the International Center for Counter-terrorism, which is part of the Hague's and George Washington University's program for extremism. Is that right?
Yeah, they're two different institutions, but yeah, same job at each. Yeah.
Well, welcome, Dr. Whiteside.
Thank
I can call you that. I can call you Craig. What are we going with today?
Craig. I prefer Craig.
You prefer Craig.
Yep.
Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel.
That's right.
Right,
Yep.
but enough tours that you're like, man, just I'm done with that sir stuff. Done with those formal titles.
Could you do this for every class that I have? Because I have this problem in my class where people just come.
I've got this. Not to call her out. I won't. No, I don't. Not too many people know where I live, but I have a new neighbor, a new NPS. Works here, 2 houses down, enlisted, and as soon as she found out, oh, it's all sir and all this, I was like, we're neighbors. Yeah. We're not a student. We don't know me otherwise. My name is Mike. Thank you.
Right.
It was like,
has that worked though?
We'll see if it holds.
Okay, good. Yeah, and I tell my students that too. Like, first of all, not in the Army. Second of all, I'm a true civilian. I have a PhD. I'm a doctor. You could call me Dr. Whiteside if you really have to. Do the respect thing, but it doesn't matter. They still call me sir. It's always going
to come out. The other person that we're welcoming today on his first interview, we'll see if this is the first one of his that airs. I think it will be. Is Brian Pajarillo, which is how I'm going to say it. He'll say his name differently. I've learned, a little FU to the Spanish, and there are times in the Philippines. It sounds like, which I guess I'm just not culturally aware enough, so I give it the correct pronunciation, Pajarillo.
Hello.
Oh, thanks, Brian. That's a really good introduction for yourself. I appreciate it. Everyone listening to this podcast is really going to get to know you from that, no doubt. So, Craig, you're here in beautiful, sunny, smoky Monterey Peninsula.
Very smoky.
And, yeah, very smoky right now. I was looking at the EPA maps, and absolutely, it's all the smoke from like all the surrounding fires is just like getting blown like right here. Like we're like this dark purple on the map, just this peninsula. And it's just really terrible outside right now. So we're inside. We're in the Trident Room. We've got some Southside cocktails. You told me to surprise you. You've got some gin, some lemon juice, and mint. A little bit of simple
indigo gin.
Rice. Indigo gin at that. That's right. So
we're getting fancy today.
Little fancy. What is your background, Craig? How did you come to NPS?
So how I ended up here was random, completely random. They just happened to be looking for someone who had a little bit of military experience and also had the academic credentials to eventually teach here. I was hired conditionally. So if I didn't finish my PhD, I would have moved on the road. So that was another motivating factor. I came here ABD. And I finished my dissertation working late nights here at NPS while I was teaching on the Islamic State, and and I was lucky enough to finish. But again, motivated reasoning.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the topics we'll get into because something I haven't mentioned so far is you're co-author of a new book published in February, if I'm not mistaken, The ISIS Reader, which is a catalog history through the ISIS's own publications, words, recordings. Of their history from the early 90s up through today. Because I think, one of the things we'll talk about is, ISIS isn't totally gone. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about that too in a little bit. But
sure. Yep.
So you've been here on the peninsula for a little while.
Yep, 7 years.
Enjoying life. Married with kids. How many kids do you have?
I have 4 kids.
Four kids.
Yep, I have one works up in San Francisco. She's 23. She graduated from Stanford grad school, and she just UCLA originally. But all since she's been here, all since we moved here to California and NPS, and then I've got one who just graduated from the USC Trojans. She's going to be an Army officer, an aviator. She's going to flight school here in another couple of weeks.
Do you know what she wants to fly?
Blackhawks. She was thinking.
That's what I always wanted to fly.
Yeah.
That's okay. So I'll have to say hi.
Yep. So she's going to be a Blackhawk pilot, hopefully, and then we've got a recent high school graduate who's going to go to UC Berkeley. Well, he's not going anywhere, unfortunately, because he's going to stay in my basement and take classes. I was hoping he was going to go to UC Berkeley, but he's just going to take online classes there because they will not be doing resident education this semester, unfortunately. And then I have a 8-year-old who's just started 3rd grade this week, and he is already on online classes, and I'm feeling for him right now.
Oh, yeah. So with family and everybody staying at home and you're teaching at home too, like, is there anything that you miss about the life before COVID?
You know, not to be super dorky, but I miss teaching in class. I don't think it's a surprise to most people that that's a pretty effective and efficient way of education. Particularly at the graduate level, I think can see lots of ways that online works well. But I miss teaching in the classroom. It's one of the things that inspired me to be in education post-military life was I like teaching in the military. I did RTC. I taught, military science. And so, the one thing when I got out, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I said, I like education. I'd like to be an educator. And so I do really enjoy the classroom, and I miss that student-to-student conversation. Not that the online experience is bad for me, and not that I don't enjoy it and feel pretty passionate about doing that online. At the same time, it's just not the same.
I'm going to guess, just based on my experience, that you're having a lot less participation than you're used to, perhaps, in the online.
Military officers are not hesitant. They're not shy. They're not wallflowers. So, if you ask the right questions, you can get them to talk.
You'll get some responses.
Yeah, that has not been one of my problems. It's hard to read your audience. It's much harder for a professor, like when you're looking at the Brady Bunch people on the screen and trying to, I can't read. I don't have these, subconscious clues on, are they getting it? Do they understand the reference if I say Munich moment? And, they're like, well, I don't. So that makes it so much harder. So it is quite a bit more difficult, but the conversation, I think, grad school is grad school. If you ask the right questions, you're going to get heated conversations and debates about U.S. national foreign policy. What should it be? Post-COVID, during COVID, great power competition.
With teaching then these online students at the War College here at MPS, do you find that there's any synergy, cross-flow? Do you have much benefit from being here in particular? Do you see that any of the research supports either school?
Absolutely. The defense analysis program, particularly with its special operations, for me teaching national security, what's the role of, let's say, ISIS? What's the role of ISIS, and how important is it in our national security when we're facing great power competition, etc.? These kind of questions are still very pertinent to our students. Had quite a few students here at MPS working on theses that are ISIS related. I don't think that will stop. So there's a lot of synergy there. And then you mentioned our book, The ISIS Reader. The origins of that book are in this room, the Trident Room, believe it or not. I met my co-author, Haroru Ingram, who was a guest professor here.
See everybody? Yeah,
the
Trident Room.
The Trident Room, the center of the universe. Not now. It's empty, but unfortunately. But I met Haroru Ingram in this room, and he was a visiting professor from Australia. The DA department had him in to talk about information operations, right, which is a topic that covers, from great power competition all the way to, who he and I consider to be quite exceptional operational, students of information operations, the Islamic State. And, we kind of started a relationship here that has gone through this book, but will probably be lifelong. I mean, we're better friends than we are academic kind of partners with our other co-author, Charlie Winter.
What are so much of your study and effort goes towards ISIS, and we've mentioned them a lot already. What are some of the experiences that you've had that have driven you to devote so much time and academic effort to studying ISIS?
Yeah, I think there's academic study or they get involved in their topics for a lot of reasons, some accidental, probably some very purposeful. For me, it was personal, and that can be an inspiration for academic study. It doesn't have to be. For me, I was an Army officer in Iraq in 2007. That's the first year, 2006 and 7. I probably showed up the exact time that they declared the Islamic State of Iraq in October '06. And sometime during that tour, having as an infantry officer, I had to deal with this group and their terrorism tactics, but really pretty fascinated with their strategy at the time. And I was there about the time where they were, suffered their first defeat. It was a defeat. It was pretty, and that's what they call it. And I was, really taken with that. And then when I went on to my PhD studies, I was lucky enough to end up in a program that looked at political violence. It looked at political psychology, like what is the psychology behind political violence? Why does it succeed and fail, in different venues or environments? And that, when it came time to choose a topic, just much like our students here choose thesis topics, I was like, I think there a lot of the stuff that I saw firsthand is applicable to what we study here at Washington State, and that's what I chose to do. So, and I finished my dissertation in 2014, which is about the time where most people learned about ISIS, but certainly they've been around for quite some time, and that's kept me busy and probably provided lots of opportunities for me to publish and research and help, either units that are deploying over there or other practitioners, United Nations or Interpol, or just anyone who's interested in kind of combating this type of phenomenon. And that's kind of what got me started.
You mentioned that the story of the ISIS reader kind of starts in the Trident Room. How did it develop from there? Where did you take it?
Yeah, we didn't have a real. Yeah, I think one time Herrera. I was visiting Herrera in Washington D.C. He works at George Washington's program of extremism, and we were collaborating on something else, and we got to talking. And one of the things that's frustrated us is kind of legends and myths that have been put on this group by kind of I'd call them casual observers, and some of them are actually pretty informed observers, but they're informed in something else, and so they see what they see, and there's a lot of projection that goes on with this particular group, and any group probably, or any enemy, any other. You're going to see a lot of projection on that, and doing research. Haro is a tremendous researcher. And, we've kind of there are a lot of myths and legends about this group that really aren't founded in, they're founded in newspaper reporting that kind of becomes legendary. And then there's no telling anyone, well, actually, the archival documents or captured documents or, classified intelligence reports that have been declassified say something totally different. And so what we wanted to do was just really simply say, this is the group in its own words, with a lot of editing. I mean, this is not an edited volume. About half of it is us analyzing and interpreting, either through footnotes or through analysis of this is what the group is mean. This is what they're referring to, because sometimes it can be quite cryptic to outsiders.
So it's been an opportunity to examine all of this primary evidence, and it's a culmination of a lot of other study and a lot of other work, and a way to present it as one kind of full story, at least up through the current times. Yeah,
that's a good way to put it, and that's how some people have found value in it. I mean, for some people, it might be too dense, it might be too much, jihadi speak, as I've heard people call it, like it's just mumbo jumbo about what they're trying to do ideologically or politically. And so maybe in some cases it doesn't serve value for those kind of folks, but others, you're right. It's all of Charlie, Herrero, and I's different kind of perspectives on the group, and put together and then reflected off of what they say. And so we try to bring in a lot of other folks, a lot of other really good research, and then present it for people to kind of make their own opinions.
Well, you said that Islamic State in Iraq had their first defeat earlier. You know,
Yeah.
you were in Iraq, or you were working on it at the time.
Yep.
And then in 2016, I found myself in Iraq
Yeah.
fighting ISIL, you know,
Yep.
in Syria as well. So what happened between those two time frames?
You know, it's not. We try to present through some documents what they are thinking about. They are defeated. It's less of a popular defeat than people, and the United States, and this is part of war, so this is not a critical comment. The United States is really kind of self-congratulatory.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, but no one said it then. I mean, they learned their lesson from 2003, right? But certainly, if you read, let's say, U.S. Army leaders during this time period, because they were able to do something pretty successful, they're going to take the political benefits of victory on the battlefield, and they're going to try to extrapolate those into a variety of things that have nothing to do with the Islamic State. You can still read military officers at the time at CENTCOM or other places saying this is still a threat, they're still there, we're managing this, but we need to do X, Y, and Z to keep this group under control.
Does that have enough national attention?
You know, it did, because at the time the attention was really about pulling troops out of Iraq, and that was a political impetus that was hard to stop. And so what I think happened is in general that a lot of the doubts about whether the mission really was accomplished kind of got papered over in order to serve the larger political need. And again, that's what warfare is about. And so you can't really critique that. You can critique the way in which these things were done. But even then, that's an our perspective. What we try to do in this book is look at what was their perspective, right? How did they overcome defeat? And I think this is what fascinates me about this period. And it's under-researched, it's underwritten about, and hopefully people will write about it. I'm writing about it this summer a little bit, research and writing, but I still, I wrote an entire paper about it this summer, and I think it's garbage, right? And most people are like, that's not what happened. And I'm like, but no, I really think that's what happened, right? And the story is yet to be told on how they were defeated, how they really critically looked at themselves and said, we messed this up, we messed this up, we messed this up, and here's our strategy to overcome that.
Can you give us a little preview?
They have a strategy document called the Fallujah Memorandum. I think it's chapter 4 in our book, and they go through, one, it's less about hearts and minds, as people tend to put it. It's really about political elites and who they are kind of recruiting, tribal elites, and the tribal elites that they lost in certain cases, and then other Sunni political elites that were operating in rival insurgent groups. They were insurgents themselves, but turned to fight the Islamic State because they didn't really agree with the overarching political program. And very importantly to all of us here at NPS, they were interested in reconciling with the government until that turned out to not be very feasible politically. And then they went back to the Islamic State.
So what do you view as some of their top strengths then that we could try to use to defeat them? Target, if you will.
Yeah, we did a pretty good job. I mean, your experience in 2016, and since the United States.
I mean, to use the words I would, is we were smashing the shit out of their network.
Yeah, I mean, and that's important, but it's obviously not going to be sufficient, right? What is going to be sufficient is generating a political coalition that has sustainable legs to really extinguish any opportunity that this group has to kind of surge a third time. And, the U.S. did a masterful job of that. I think that's another story that has not been really been written. Like, how politically does the Obama administration and later the Trump administration knit together a 79 to 82 state coalition to defeat this group in a time that's not necessarily known for, multilateral or multinational military efforts, not political or economic or even global warming or climate change. It's focused on defeating a non-state, wannabe state actor in the Middle East, right? But you have France, you have Belgium, you have the Netherlands, you have Australia, New Zealand, and Jordan. You have all of these countries that are committed to doing this, and that's a really interesting story. But the question, much like the first go round, is it sustainable, and how do you sustain this political effort?
Well, and now, the political effort kind of seems to be done. President Trump announces in his 2019 State of the Union address, ISIS is defeated, they're done for, smashed, gone. Maybe, he doesn't use the word gone or anything. He uses the word defeated, I think.
Yeah.
So
No,
then,
I think it's more like destroyed.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, not like the military would use defeat versus destroy
Right.
versus decimated versus.
All these doctrinal
Right.
terminologies, right?
It means something, right?
Yeah, so is the U.S. now, do you think, still prepared to commit the level of resources that is required to prevent that third resurgence? And I guess I asked that in light of, attention.
Yeah, historically, no.
And the
historically,
national
no.
defense strategy
Yeah.
and everything else
We're
were
going to run off the great power competition.
China, Russia,
Right.
North Korea, Iran, right?
Right.
So
Worse, and I that is understandable. Like that, when part of good grand strategy is prioritizing, right? But when you wish away the problems that really do exist, or the alligators closer to the boat, as some people call it, it's problematic. And the only people that I'll get my feathers ruffled over are people who are like, we've wasted our time the last 16 years on GWAT or fighting this group that's really insignificant, and we've learned all the wrong lessons from it, which is impossible to me, right? I mean, you have experiences and you learn from them. There's no good and bad lessons to learn, or lessons that that you don't even need to worry about learning. Those are the only people that I can get a little frustrated at, to be honest. But I think there's a lot for us to learn from this group that really talk to us more about the nature, the character of war today, whether it's the information environment, the cyber environment. The fight against ISIS allowed the U.S. to do, and its coalition partners to do, really amazing things, whether it's targeting, the air power, in new, innovative ways that will obviously come in handy for future competition and conflict.
Well, and let's be real. It's not like out there during our fight in ISIS we weren't also coming up against some of our other competitors named in the national defense strategy. Some of them were out there too, and we were maybe sharing the same runway sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not like we weren't gathering other information and lessons simultaneously.
Yeah. And they learned a lot too, right?
And at the same time, trying to keep the threat of terrorism, which was the primary world focus, at bay for 16 years. So I think that's what a point you raise.
Yeah, and there is a threat. Otherwise, the Europeans, just wouldn't be very gung-ho about jumping on this coalition if they didn't see this as a threat to their own people. And, people of Paris, France will tell you.
Well, where would we
significant.
be if we just thought that this was going to disappear in 5 years and ignore it right now?
Especially during COVID.
Right. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of budgetary pressures in the future. The challenge of China is looming. Russia in the news this week. And these are all going to compete, and it's going to make it harder to do what we want to do in order to do what you said, just really mitigate and manage this threat.
Thanks for joining us in the Trident Room. This episode was recorded the 19th of August, 2020. For more information about today's guests and topics, please visit the show notes. The Trident Room has been brought to you by the Naval Postgraduate School Alumni Association and Foundation. For questions, comments, and suggestions, please email us at tridentroom@nps.edu and find us online at nps.edu/Trident Room Podcast.